Helping eliminate racism, discrimination, and harassment in Canada. That was the focus of a national discussion last week. The Canadian Congress on Inclusive Diversity and Workplace Equity hosted a free 2-day virtual program featuring over 50 trailblazers, including the Honourable Jean Augustine, the first Black woman member of the Parliament of Canada. Their theme for 2022, Dismantling Colonialism, Building Cohesiveness.
To discuss what came out of this national campaign, we welcome to CP24 tonight Tonya Williams, actress and founder of Reelworld Film Festival and Institute, and Alex Ihama, executive director of the Canadian Congress on Inclusive Diversity and Workplace Equity. Pleasure to have the both of you on. Alex, let's start by talking about this year's theme. It's certainly very powerful. Dismantling colonialism, building cohesiveness. What was the hope behind this year's campaign?
Well, thanks for having us, by the way. What was behind it was over the last 2 years since the passing of George Floyd, a lot of organizations, frankly, have been doing their best. Even the government, they're doing one or two things to move it forward. But everybody seems to be focused on the outcome, but not on the root cause. The root cause of racism is colonialism, and that is the topic that we must talk about. If you want to take care of any issue, you often have to go to the root cause. So that is really why we wanted to educate thousands of people across Canada and certainly around the world on the concept of colonialism. If you did not grow up in a country that was colonized, chances are you never even heard the word before. And if you did, you don't know what it means. So based on the feedback we've been getting, people are excited. And lots of messages thanking us for helping them to better understand the root cause of racism, the issue that we are faced with today.
Some people react to colonialism the way they react to the word racism. Tonya, you talked about balanced representation in the media. What was your message?
You know, it was wonderful that Alex put this whole thing together, because a lot of us have been leaders in this whole, sort of fight and in this advocacy work for decades. But to have people all come together and really talk about the issues within the different industries. And of course, I was focused on the screen industry, which it's so important for our stories to be told, but not just any story and not just to put people of color anywhere. If you're still dealing with colonialism, then you're always trying to work around a system that is already against you, really, already, that you're sort of fighting to get into something. And I think one of the great things that came out of the discussion is most of us aren't fighting anymore to get into anything. We're creating our own structures because that's the only way to move forward.
Alex, a number of topics were looked at here, including politics, the history of racism, allyship. These are very important conversations. Can you give us a sense of some of the biggest takeaways?
Yes, one of the biggest takeaways was for people to recognize that even though history tells us that colonialism has ended, it has actually evolved, right? So that's one of the biggest takeaways, because colonialism continues to exist even in the parliament, in the hills of parliament. It exists in the banks, in the organization, in the insurance company. Colonialism, people think it was an event, but it's actually a mindset. It's the current mindset with which some people lead the organization. The current mindset, colonialism, even the technology we use in workplaces, some of them were built with colonial mindset, which means it continues in systems, it continues in policies, it continues in culture, it continues in management. So that's why we actually brought together about 60 experts, people from academia, people from politics, from the government, people from, the communities. And they all came together and they saw that, yes, history told us colonialism ended, but that wasn't true. It's just like history never told us about the genocide against the indigenous people in this country. History never told many people about the slavery that occurred. In fact, the story of Black people did not start with slavery. Right, so they picked it up from slavery and moved on, but Black people existed way before slavery. So this program, frankly, I mean, not even what I say. They're all saying this should be in schools. This should be part of the educational curriculum in schools. It should be part of the training programs in organizations. The government should talk about it and not just limit Black history to February. There's enough history to go around to the end of the world, not just February. So this was an expose, if you will, an expose of the untold truth, of the inconvenient truth, of what everybody must know. We brought in indigenous people. One of the comments we read today says, thank you. It's really the first time I've seen an event with both indigenous people, Black people, white people, South Asian coming together. It is time we all come together and make the statement to dismantle colonialism and build cohesiveness.
Alex, what do you say to someone who's watching and they love the royal family, they love following things to do with the Queen, they love the history of the British and the French in this country? What do you say to them who's listening now when they're not really sure about dismantling colonialism?
Thank you very much for that question. It was a question I was also asked at the Congress. Honorable Jean Augustine said it best. She said this, quote, he says, "You cannot claim to be an ally if you don't know our history. So I challenge you, don't believe what I say. Go to Google, go to your library, go to the books, and do your own research, and you will find out that colonialism continues. Even the Buckingham Palace was built on the back of slaves. The Bank of England built on the back of slaves. The White House built on the back of slaves. Right? The Parliament here built on the back of slaves. I didn't say so. History says so. It is time. We brought in professors, professors from York University, University of Toronto, Ryerson University, and we brought in a professor from Wilfrid Laurier. All of them. These are PhD. They have all these PhD and big degrees, and they all agree that it is time we re-educate people. The root cause, one of the root cause of the issue we are faced with today is miseducation and misinformation. It is time we get it right. History books should be rewritten because the history books we have today is abbreviated. Completely eliminate the stories of Black people and of indigenous people from this country. Canada is an offspring. Canada is a corporation. Technically, not even a country. They have a treaty, it's a corporation, and it was an outcome of colonialism coming from afar. For an example, they say Christopher Columbus discovered North America. He never did. Christopher Columbus visited America. They should change the books, not discovered, visited. I cannot go to a country and say I discovered it. I'm a visitor. Christopher Columbus discovered nothing. He's a visitor. Do your research, and you see there were people there before he arrived.
You know, it's so interesting.
I think there was actually a lot of conversation at the Congress talking around history and how it's been taught to us. But this person was the first person up Mount Everest. It's always a white person. This was the first person at a North Pole. This was the person that discovered Jamaica. They forget people were already living there. People were already going up Mount Everest. It's just that if you were a person of color, it was not considered valid or valuable. Only when a white person got there was it then historically recorded as this is a thing that just happened. And, colonialism is not just about the Queen. I think you can still love the Queen if that's your thing. Colonialism is really about the structure of how things were organized once people came into other people's countries. I mean, right now we have gatekeepers. There's a lot of people of color that they have to go to the gatekeepers to get a mortgage, to open up a business. There were a lot of times that loans were given out to a lot of white Canadians that were held back from Indigenous and Black people and Asian and South Asian people. This is now a time for reckoning, but this has been going on for a really long time. And it's about opening the doors sort of to everyone and making it fair for everyone. It's not about making it unfair to certain people. It has been unfair. That's what colonialism really is. It's been unfair to a large group of people.
I think you raised such an interesting point there. Black people, people of color telling their own stories from their own perspective. Tonya, you've been doing so much work to help Black Canadians and Canadians of color in the entertainment industry, and you bring with you such an interesting perspective. How important was it for you to draw from your own experiences and the struggles that you faced as a Black actor?
I can talk about the struggles when I started 45 years ago, but those are still struggles happening now. So even when we talk about authentic people telling their authentic stories, they still have to go to the people in charge of the broadcast stations, in charge of the streaming stations. They still have the same gatekeepers at the top that they have to convince to allow them to tell their stories. And this is the part that has to end. We shouldn't have to convince people that our stories are valuable. They are valuable. But you get broadcasters, distributors saying, these are not valuable stories. The world is not interested in these stories. An audience is not interested in these stories. What they're saying is a white audience is not interested in these stories. So those are still the check marks, I would say, that allow people to get greenlit, to get funding, to get their stories told. And I think that has to change. That's what we're talking about in terms of colonialism. I remember it wasn't that long ago that Hollywood said a movie by an all-Black cast just could not sell anywhere in the world. And then Black Panther broke that. So these are just things that people think in their heads, but they're not truth. They're not based on data. And data is another important thing that we talked about at the conference. We haven't been collecting data. And a lot of people who are the gatekeepers have been saying, well, we don't want to infringe on people's privacy. But it's really not about that, because the data tells the truth. And if you don't collect the data, you'll actually never know what the truth really is.
Okay, Tonya Williams and Alex Ihama, thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you on and for giving us a chance to listen and learn. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you both.